I am a 32-year-old female and have a 5-year-old daughter Emma with my husband George, a 33-year-old male. George and I have been married for about 8 years now. We met in college through some common friends, dated for a couple of years, and then finally got married. We have had a normal relationship, and the fights we used to have weren't anything out of the ordinary, but this recent one doesn't fall into that category. And that's why I'm here for advice, because I really don't know if I was in the wrong here or not. I'm lost, and my husband and I haven't spoken for 4 whole days because of our fight, so I need to talk about this urgently. George has a younger sister, Kendra, a 30-year-old female, who got divorced from her husband of 4 years a couple of months ago due to irreconcilable differences, according to her. Since then, she's been down in the dumps and has been visiting us frequently. But I didn't mind because she and I shared a good relationship. She was happy when she'd be around Emma, and my daughter also appreciated spending time and playing with her aunt, so I didn't have a problem with her coming over often, and of course, neither did George. Then, about a month and a half ago, daily, I received a promotion at work and took up a new project, which meant an increase in my workload. George and I did have a professional babysitter to look after Emma when she came back home from kindergarten until either George or I got back from work. We didn't think it was a good idea for her to be left alone at home for hours, so this was our best way forward until she was old enough to stay home by herself. We could afford it, so we didn't have a problem with this arrangement until I took up the new project and decided to work on Saturdays as well, until I was done with my work to ease up the pressure. Unfortunately, my husband also works Saturdays, so he couldn't stay back home with Emma either. We'd spoken to our babysitter, but she wasn't willing to work 6 days a week regardless of the raise we offered. So we were in a tight situation. But then Kendra offered to look after Emma on the Saturdays, and we were grateful to her, since she was giving up her day off to take care of her niece, and that was a big deal. Plus, we trusted her, and she was great with Emma as well, so we went ahead with that arrangement, and we were okay with it, up until a week ago when my daughter finally told me what her aunt had been up to at our house when we were not at home. Through these past couple of weeks, I'd noticed that the number of toys that Emma had was gradually increasing, but we hadn't bought her any new toys recently. I'd never even seen some of the new toys she happened to be playing with, and neither did George, so I asked Kendra about it, and she told me that these were her gifts to Emma. I didn't have an issue with it at the time, but I did tell her to not give her gifts so often because we didn't want to spoil her by giving her something new to play with every week, and she said that she wouldn't, but it continued. I wanted to confront her about it, but didn't because it just sounded too dramatic to throw a fit because she was spoiling my daughter with too many gifts when she was giving up her weekend to look after her, so I decided not to say anything. However, last week I finally found out the reason why exactly Kendra was giving my daughter so many gifts. They weren't gifts, potentially per se, but were actually bribes for my daughter to keep her mouth shut about what Kendra was actually using my house for, and when Emma finally told me what was going on, I couldn't hold back and decided to report her to the police. Last week, while I was playing with my daughter, I decided to ask her about one of the toys she had, a red-haired doll for fun. It happened to be one that Kendra had given her, and when I asked Emma how she'd got a hold of this doll, she told me that Aunt Kendra had gifted her this doll so that she would keep her mouth shut about Mr. Johnny, who would come home every weekend. When she said that, I was immediately on high alert because Kendra wasn't supposed to have visitors at our house when she was by herself. Nobody was, especially not when it was just her and Emma, because that sounded like a recipe for disaster. So I pushed my daughter to talk about it, but she refused, saying that Kendra had told her that she was not supposed to talk about this with her mommy, referring to me, and if she did tell me, Kendra would stop buying her gifts and wouldn't visit her ever again, which she didn't want, so she refused to tell me anything else. Kendra must have drilled it into her head pretty well because it was almost impossible to get her to talk, and only after about half an hour of coaxing and cajoling did Emma finally open up about what was going on and what she'd seen. She told me that the Redheim doll was the first ewe that Kendra had bought for her when she'd witnessed this Johnny guy visiting her. Emma was supposed to be napping at the time but had been roaming around in the house because she was bored, and that's when she noticed Kendra going into our bedroom with Johnny. And when Kendra noticed Emma watching, she locked the room and told her that she'd get in trouble if she breathed a word of this to me. So she didn't say anything, and Kendra promised to buy her toys if she stayed silent, which is what she did. But, now that I'd begun to uncover these secrets that she'd been keeping from me, I absolutely had to find out more and pushed my daughter to tell me about this man who'd been visiting. I'd already concluded that Kendra had been having an affair with some guy and had been using our house as their hookup spot. What really took me by surprise was when Emma told me that she'd seen this man in photos around our house. And I was stunned because that meant she was having an affair with someone we knew. I asked her to point out who exactly she'd seen, and she led me to a photograph that we'd kept on the mantel of us with both our families on the day of our wedding. She pointed out Jonathan, who happened to be married to one of my cousins, Irene. Irene and Jonathan weren't together anymore and had divorced very recently when she found out that he'd been cheating on her with another woman. And it all made sense when my daughter finally opened up about what Kendra had been up to. Jonathan and Irene's divorce had pretty much shocked everyone in our family, since they'd been high school sweethearts, and even had twin toddlers together, so for them to part ways due to infidelity was something that none of us could have ever imagined. And neither could we have even imagined Jonathan smashing the windshield of Irene's car with a brick the day after their divorce was finalized, because Irene had walked away with half of his bank balance as her divorce settlement. She hadn't pressed charges because, according to her, she was just too emotionally drained and wanted this to be over, but everyone felt that she should have. I personally felt that Jonathan was unhinged, and she should have filed for a restraining order against him, but ultimately it was her choice, and I couldn't say anything against it. However, now that I knew what I knew about Kendra, I decided that I had to report this because, in my opinion, she'd put my child in the same house as someone like Jonathan, who was definitely unhinged and didn't deserve to be around kids. Least of all, my daughter and I might have been acting emotionally, but as soon as I put two and two together, I decided to call the police and report Kendra for endangering Emma. I didn't think it was appropriate for her to bring another man home while she was supposed to be watching over my daughter, let alone someone like Jonathan who'd literally done something so crazy just out of anger. The cops did get to her, but let her off with a warning and a fine because she claimed that she had no idea what Jonathan had done in the past, which was just not possible because I myself had discussed the situation about Irene and Jonathan with her a couple of times, so I knew that she was well aware of who Jonathan was. Last weekend, my husband was out on a business trip and wasn't at home when I discovered what Kendra had been up to behind our backs, and I'd called the cops before I'd informed him, which is why he came back and got into a really bad fight with me over this. I'd tried to inform him after I'd called the cops, but he hadn't answered my calls or texts until he came back home. He accused me of being too paranoid and said that Kendra would never have put Emma in harm's way knowingly, and refused to believe that Kendra was aware of Jonathan's behavior regarding Irene in the past. According to Kendra, she had indeed been having an affair with him after she met him at our Christmas party last year, but they did come clean to their partners soon enough afterwards, and she really had no idea that he'd smashed Irene's car. She'd been living with her parents after the divorce and couldn't just bring home another man, and he was living with a friend of his because they couldn't move in together just yet, which is why they'd been hooking up at our house, which is just gross to even think about. She kept denying that she knew about Jonathan's behavior and said that had she known, she never would have brought him home around Emma because she didn't want to make me feel unsafe or betrayed. But I do feel both of those things, and I also feel really angry because I specifically remember telling Kendra about what Jonathan had done to Irene's car during their divorce. And we'd even discussed how lucky she was that she didn't have a psycho ex-husband who would do such a thing. So I know for a fact that she's been lying about not being familiar with Jonathan's mental instability. I didn't want a man like that in or around my house, and I did feel lied to, betrayed, and hurt by what Kendra had done. But my husband still thinks that I should have consulted with him at least before I went ahead and reported her to the cops. I don't understand where I messed up here, because as a mother, I did what I thought was right, but George insists that I could have dealt with this better and that I should have waited for him to come home at least before I did whatever I thought was right. He told me that my paranoia could have led to serious trouble for his sister, and that I was being too sensitive because, obviously, Jonathan wasn't even that unstable. And he just smashed that car in a moment of anger and weakness. I know that's a messed up defense, but that's an argument for another day, and right now I need to pick my battles. I don't think calling the police was the wrong move, but maybe I should have waited for George to come back home before doing anything, and then, after speaking to him, we could have gone ahead with whatever we decided was the right thing to do. Now, I don't know what that would have been according to him, but I guess I could have discussed this with him before taking things into my own hands, because it was his sister after all, and a tiny part of me thinks that maybe I did overreact. Now, I don't know if that's because I've been gaslit or whatever, but maybe I took things too far and this could have actually been resolved with a civilized discussion instead. I just honestly don't know if what I did was right or wrong, and my husband isn't speaking to me right now, so I feel even more lost. I just have no idea whether I did the right thing as a mother or whether it was a crazy overreaction. I just have no idea, and that's why I'm here right now. Am I the a-hole for reporting my sister-in-law to the police for bringing her violent boyfriend home while babysitting my daughter without talking to my husband about the same? Update 1. So first of all, thanks to everyone who responded. It really did help me get a sense of perspective because I'd literally lost my head worrying about what my husband thought. I think it probably was all the gaslighting, in hindsight, that made me think I must have messed up. But I know now that I did the right thing as a mother. And that's what I am, first and foremost. I am Emma's mother first, and everyone else, literally everyone, including George, comes second. If that offends him, then too bad. But I'm not going to act like I'm sorry for not consulting with him about something that concerned my daughter's safety. And to be fair, his sister hadn't consulted with me either before she brought Jonathan home. Not only did she bring that man home several times, she also hooked up with him while leaving Emma on her own, and in spite of that, George thinks that Kendra wouldn't put her in harm's way. She literally did exactly that, and we were just lucky that nothing happened to Emma while she was on her own. If George fails to realize that, then that's on him and not on me. I did what I thought was right, and I'm going to stand by it. I even confronted him about it a couple of days back after I went through the comments on my original post. And I think what he's mad about is that I dared to question Kendra's integrity, or whatever, because to him she's his little sister who can do no wrong. This is just so ridiculous, because she's actually a 30-year-old woman who knew full well what she was up to and lied to us for weeks and even bribed my 5-year-old daughter just so she could mess around with her boyfriend. George has been fighting with me over this, and I guess this is the hill he's going to choose to die on by the looks of it, because he's absolutely not ready to accept that maybe Kendra was in the wrong here and insists that I'm the one who's overreacting, because at the end of the day, our daughter's safe. She's safe now, but there was a very real chance that if we'd continued to entrust her with this responsibility, then maybe our daughter would have suffered. I don't know how exactly, but I could tell him about 1,000 ways things could have gone south because of Kendra's irresponsible and frankly disgusting behavior. But he's just not ready to even hear anything against his sister. Defending her is more important to him than the safety of his own daughter. So that's where we're at in our relationship right now, and I just don't know what to do or how to make him see sense. He still refuses to engage in a civil discussion with me until I apologize to Kendra for reporting her, which is never going to happen. She hasn't even apologized to me yet, so it's rich of my husband to expect that I'm going to say that I'm sorry for what I did, especially when I'm not in the slightest. And then there's the fact that he's also defending what Jonathan did by repeating over and over again that what he did was something that happens when people are overcome with emotions, and it's not fair for me to call him psychotic and unstable based on that one incident. He never said any of this back when I'd originally told him about the incident, but now that it was his sister who was involved here, it was suddenly important for him to defend Jonathan simply because it was convenient for him now. I just can't agree with that ideology at all, and it really makes me think that if someday he loses his temper, then maybe he'll believe that it's okay to smash things or throw stuff around, or maybe even worse. I don't even want to say these things out loud because it's awful enough to imagine them as it is, and I don't want to think about them. But the bottom line is, right now I can't see any way out of this situation because he's not going to stop defending Kendra. And I can't trust her ever again. So my only solution is to leave him, which is a scary thought, but I know I have to do this for my daughter's sake and also my own. I think I should have left a long time back, as soon as he started defending Kendra, but I was foolish enough to believe that he'd change his mind with time, or that I'd be able to change his mind and make him see sense, to be more precise. But that's not going to happen, and I've given up any hope of it. Update 2. It's been a week and a half since I first posted here, and today I finally moved out. George didn't even try to argue with or get me to stay when I told him last night that I would be leaving today, and neither did he ask about Emma, which was very shocking for me. He told me that I was free to go wherever I wanted to because he didn't want to be with someone who didn't respect him and his family, referring to what I'd done with Kendra. So he's still on it, and trying to manipulate me into believing that I was somehow in the wrong here, which by now, literally everyone involved knows I wasn't. Even Irene, who knows about what happened after I told her who exactly Jonathan had been cheating with, believes that at this point, they're all just forcing themselves to make me look like the bad guy so that they're not forced to look within themselves and find the filth and lies they've filled themselves with to avoid any accountability at all. I agree with her wholeheartedly because I really can't imagine any other reason to still continue supporting Kendra, even though she literally put Emma, his own daughter, in danger. Like I said earlier, defending his sister and proving that he's right is more important to him than his family. Or maybe he doesn't think of us as his family at all and only cares about Kendra and his parents, who are also on her side, by the way. Because that's actually what it feels like right now, since he just let me and Emma go without putting up a fight, not even for my sake, but at least for Emma's sake. I expected him to at least ask about her, but he didn't, which is something I'm still struggling to come to terms with. Even though a couple of hours have passed since I left. It just sucks that after 8 years of marriage and more than a decade of being together, it still hasn't amounted to anything, and he's still choosing to treat us like crap, and all for Kendra. The same woman who ruined not one but 2 marriages, and, if you count mine, then you can actually make it 3. It's so heartbreaking, and what's even more devastating is that I don't even have any answers for Emma right now. She doesn't know why she hasn't seen Aunt Kendra in ages, and neither does she know why she's leaving her dad at home and moving to her grandparents' place with me. Maybe for good. She keeps asking me, and I just don't know what to tell her. It's devastating, but it is what it is, and I know this is in her best interests, so I'll do it for our sake. Update 3. I finally got in touch with a lawyer this week and filed for divorce with full custody a couple of days back. George was served with a notice today, and he texted me to demand visitation rights at the very least, and that full custody was an unfair demand. I don't know why he believes that I'm being unfair to him, because I think he should have seen this coming, given the fact that he hasn't bothered to reach out to me and check on his own daughter after we left, and it's been about 2 weeks since we've been living with my parents, so he had plenty of time to contact me for Emma's sake. He chose not to, and that's all that I needed to conclude that he doesn't deserve to be a part of Emma's life. It's taken me a while to explain to her that her father and Kendra aren't going to be a part of her life for a while, until she grows up and can make her own decisions, and I'm not going to confuse her by reintroducing her to George again. There has to be an end to this, and I'm going to choose to end their relationship here, because I don't think he valued us at all, honestly. He screwed up royally, so now he pays the price for that, and I think full custody is completely fair. I texted him back saying that he can contest it if he thinks I'm being unfair, but it's ultimately up to the court to decide what's fair and what's unfair, not him. I thought that was a pretty neutral response, but for whatever reason, even that was enough to provoke him into getting all aggressive, and he started calling me names and accusing me of trying to alienate his child from him, which simply wasn't true. I think anyone with half a brain would be able to tell that he himself was responsible for whatever was going to happen now, and there was just no point in blaming me for a situation that he created. It's ridiculous that he even expected me to take his argument seriously, and I really had no time to waste arguing with him, so I blocked him. It's been a couple of hours since then, and I've also forwarded all the texts to my lawyer, just in case she needs them during the divorce proceedings or the custody battle. I've been trying to balance work and spending time with my daughter after I moved out, and have delegated my work to other employees instead of trying to manage everything on my own, which I guess was my biggest flaw. But my daughter is my top priority right now, and I don't want to delegate that job to anyone anymore. I've learned my lesson now. Aha. Update 4. Hi, so it's been a few months. Lots of things have happened since my last update, but most importantly, I'm divorced now and a single mother. I've moved into a new apartment of my own and am no longer living with my parents and occupying their guest room, but I still drop by from time to time since they live close. I haven't spoken to George, my ex-husband, since the divorce because things got really nasty during the legal battle. I don't want to get into that because it isn't relevant, but there was a lot of public mudslinging that his family indulged in for the most part. Kind of sad since we were all really close at some point, but I can't say I'm surprised at their behavior. I knew it was going to happen, the change in their behavior, and it was only a matter of when. At least my daughter and I are doing better now, so I guess that's something. I'm happy that things are working out now, and I'm slowly but surely getting used to being on my own now and coming to terms with my life. It isn't going to be easy hereafter, but I'm so ready for whatever challenges life throws at me now.